Well, welcome everyone. My name is Gary, and this is the fourth official here on YouTube. And you're joining us for the kickoff show ahead of the big match on Sunday at Rugby Park as Rangers go to visit Kilmarnock. Joining me on this show to provide a little bit of local flavour and inside knowledge to the challenge that we'll be facing Philippe Clement's Rangers side down at Rugby Park on Sunday is Kilmarnock fan Laurie Finlayson. Very warm welcome, Laurie. Thank you for joining us here on the fourth official.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Gary. It's an absolute pleasure, and I'm hoping for a good game tomorrow. I think it will be an interesting watch if you can obviously make it along, or if you're watching it live on Sky.
Yeah, it's one of those games. I think it's synonymous with proper SPFL football, and I think coming off the back of an international break, which has felt like it's been about 3 weeks, it's good to get kind of proper football back. And a trip to Rugby Park is always a game that historically seemed to bring out a big challenge for the Rangers side, particularly under the Steve Clarke era. But Derek McInnes is a manager who's had the Indian sign over Rangers plenty of times in the past, and you only have to look back to the season opener of just last season to know Kilmarnock on their own patch in the big games can be quite a threat. But it's not quite been the start to the season that I think everyone down at Kilmarnock would have been hoping for, especially with the being back in European competition at the start of the season. I think that seemed to be certainly from the outside a big distraction to the way that the league season started off for Kelly.
Yeah, it very much has been a distraction, or it was a distraction. I think maybe now over the last few weeks we've started to see the team kind of find their feet a wee bit and get back to, somewhere closer to where we were last season. However, even with the kind of stuttering start, we've only lost to Rangers, Celtic, and St Johnstone on our own patch since December last year, and that includes the European ties. So we're still kind of a force to be reckoned with at home. But I think maybe we do need to kind of kick on sooner rather than later. Of course, tomorrow's game will be, a real challenge for that. But I think there are signs that we could still have a similar season to last season. Maybe not quite hit fourth, but I could still see us, get into that top six eventually.
Yeah, I've spoken before previously, Laurie, about the advantage that Kilmarnock have at home and the great record that they've got there. Obviously, this is the final season of the much talked about plastic pitch, and the advantage that certainly seems to give the home side, and certainly it seems to be part of the reason for that really good home record. It's been something that I feel has been in Rangers' heads that the last two or three times that they've been down there, that they've almost kind of overthought it, not picking certain players for the match because they don't want to risk them in terms of kind of muscle type injuries on the park. And I think given that we've got three or four players that are on their way back from injury problems, what sort of kind of Rangers team do you expect to see lining up for the match tomorrow?
I mean, I would like to think the Rangers will go pretty strong. I mean, you might know better than me, but the thing is, you say teams sometimes don't like to risk certain players on the on the artificial surface. I know Celtic sometimes there were certain players maybe in the past that they didn't always risk on the surface. Certain defenders, I can always think of the likes of Jozo Simunovic and that at Celtic back in the day were never risked on the surface. Random one that comes to mind. But a bit of potential bad news on that. I think there might be an extra year of the AstroTurf pitch, because it was only going to go if the training ground was up and running. We haven't even managed to break ground on that, so I think maybe sadly for yourself and other fans of other clubs, I think we might have an extra year of the AstroTurf pitch. We're cutting it fine because obviously they're what is it outlawed by the summer of 2026. So we'll see what happens with that one.
Um, As obviously a Kilmarnock fan, though, do you buy into the theory that the pitch is an advantage for you in those home games, or is it just a little bit of a kind of red herring?
I'm never sure because sometimes you feel like maybe against the likes of Rangers and Celtic, it can be something of a leveler, but I think sometimes by the media it's a little bit overblown because I mean, you know, the Arsenal pitch doesn't really, bother the other players too much. It doesn't seem obviously players will, not say too much about it. But obviously, in the Kilmarnock team, like there's a couple of like ex-Rangers players, for example. I mean, you don't see Lewis Mayo, for instance, complaining about the Arsenal pitch now that he's here, or even managers. I mean, Derek McInnes was one who he always admitted that he was never a massive fan of it, but then when he actually works on it every day, he's like, it's not as bad as it's not as bad as we make it out to be. So I'm never sure if it's a red herring or if maybe it does have an impact. Though I think on in games like this, it's important because you said it yourself. It gets in Rangers' head or it can get in Celtic's head as well, and I think that can play to our advantage. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. First of 7 games in a 3-week spell for Rangers coming back from the international break across 3 different competitions. So obviously the Premier League, a couple of Europa League matches, and the big League Cup semi-final at the beginning of November. So expect to see probably a little bit of tinkering for Philippe Clement, especially maybe with a couple of players who have been away on international duty, the likes of Vaslav Cherny and Nadim Bayrami, who were away with Albania and Czechia. So whether or not they'll be involved remains to be seen. But difficulty, I think, for Rangers, particularly in the wide areas, is the fact that Ross McCausland, Rabbi Matondo, and Oscar Cortez are all still unavailable due to various injuries. Cortez certainly the furthest away from a first team return. Danilo, another one who is back in training, but given his injury problems over 2024, it would be a massive shock to see him involved in the match on Sunday. So I reckon it's going to be fairly similar in terms of last time out for Rangers. Tom Lawrence not mentioned at all by Philippe Clement in yesterday's press conference, so I would expect to see that the likes of Cyril Dessers up top, midfield, Conor Barron, who was obviously involved in the Scotland setup over the international break. Didn't get on for the game against Portugal, but another call up to the national team. Certainly good for his confidence. Nico Rashkin obviously played last time out as well. So interesting to see the makeup of the Rangers, particularly the midfield for the game, because that's an area that sometimes I think they've came a little bit unstuck down at Kilmarnock. You think of players like Alan Power in the past who always tended to have a good game, and then you look back at the first game of last season and it was that midfield area that obviously got Kilmarnock the 3 points on opening day.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an area where we can be strong and maybe we can take a little bit of confidence in the sense of you don't really know, as you pointed out there, what Rangers kind of midfield is going to be. So I think it's an area we can take confidence, albeit maybe we're not 100% sure what ours is going to be because obviously you've got the likes of David Watson, who quite rightly gets a fair bit of, media hype about him. You've got obviously Brad Lyons, who scored the goal against Rangers at the start of last season. And then there's people like Liam Donnelly, who kind of plays that Alan Power like enforcer kind of role now. So who knows? And obviously, back in the start of last season, you had Kyle McGuinness playing, who was excellent, but he's been missing for the best part of a year due to a really bad hamstring injury. They're hoping to get him back in the coming weeks, but like the midfield, it's one of these things where it's maybe changed or evolved a little bit since what will that be now? August 2023. But it's still very much the same sort of, structure, if you will.
Yep. In terms of like Kelly, you mentioned David Watson, who quite rightly has got a lot of plaudits in terms of his development and starting to obviously get more first team minutes this season. He was kind of in and out the side at times last year under Derek McInnes. But one player who doesn't appear to be in the greatest of form, but had a great season for you last year, was Danny Armstrong on the flanks. Obviously, you've seen him a lot more this season than I have. obviously scoring goals hasn't necessarily been a problem for Kilmarnock this season. It's been keeping them in at the other end. Obviously, Robbie McCrory was brought in at the start of this year from Rangers to try and kind of fill that gap. Hasn't quite hit the heights that I think we were all expecting him to do. Obviously, he's had a few injury issues as well there. Talk to me about Armstrong and McCrory.
Yeah, so we'll go with Danny Armstrong first. I mean, what I will make clear on Armstrong is he's not actually playing badly. It's just one of these ones where a player has set such an incredibly high bar for themselves. I mean, last year I'm sure Danny Armstrong created the most chances in the league. If he didn't, he was second in it. And he obviously at the start of the season there was a lot of speculation around his future because his contractual situation is still up in the air. He's out of contract at the end of the season, and he became a dad as well, so he had a lot kind of on his mind at the start of the season. And in recent weeks, again, he's been playing a little bit better, but we're not necessarily seeing the same kind of creative force as last season. Obviously, he has not got so many assists to his name, and he hasn't scored yet, which is unlike him. Although in recent weeks, especially Matty Kennedy on the opposite flank has been playing particularly well. And as for Robbie McCrory, it's a strange one because I for one was absolutely delighted when we signed him. I felt like it was a real kind of coup for Kilmarnock to get such a goalkeeper. He's a guy who always seemed to be a decent keeper, but just needed to go somewhere like ourselves for that bit of, game time that unfortunately he wasn't getting at Rangers. And we've seen flashes of a good goalkeeper, but then we've also seen, some mistakes in his game. Then he was obviously unfortunate in the middle of the European run to pick up a minor injury. And then after he recovered from that, Kieran O'Hara stayed in the team. O'Hara then makes a mistake in the game against Dundee United. And then after that, Robbie got the gloves back for the Dundee game. But then again, I wouldn't say he covered himself in glory in that, although I do think in the longer term, Robbie McCrory will be Kilmarnock's number one, although it is a bit of a bone of contention among Kilmarnock fans at the moment.
Yeah, interesting to see what the lineup is for the game tomorrow. Elsewhere in Scotland, another big game kicking off on Saturday between the top two, putting their unbeaten 100% records on the line. Celtic taking on Aberdeen. Aberdeen been mightily impressive so far this season under Jimmy Teelan. 13 wins out of 13. But a trip to Parkhead is a very different story for Aberdeen. Biggest challenge that they've certainly came across this year, and with Rangers going up to Pittodrie in a couple of weeks' time, a big test about their credentials as to whether or not they can stick in at the top of the season. But they've done very, very well so far this year under Teelan, a very different proposition than certainly where they were last year. Obviously, Neil Warnock's campaign didn't do terribly well. Before that, Barry Robson far from successful up there. So for a team like Kilmarnock, seeing Aberdeen about resurgence not ideal when obviously you're looking for those kind of European places in that kind of third, fourth, fifth place area. But as you say, despite the relatively slow start to the season, Kelly, not that far away from, I think, where you would expect to want to be come at the end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Derek McInnes actually put it into perspective when he did his press conference on Thursday. He said that we're only 1 point worse off than we were at this stage last season, whereas people have been maybe a little bit more panicked this campaign for some reason. I think it's maybe because we're kind of a bit blinded by the European games. But Aberdeen, by the way, let's make something clear. I've actually really been impressed by them. Jimmy Trelane has been a real breath of fresh air. And I mean, I wasn't expecting it to go like that. I thought it was going to take a bit more of a settling in period because a lot was made of, his style of play and how long it would take, for him to be able to put that across. But I think maybe the game against Celtic will be, his toughest test yet because obviously it's the first time he's played one of the big two from Glasgow. But I think that could be a really good game to look at on the highlights later. But I think Aberdeen are just, they're going really well. But I think the injury to Pape Gaye, the striker, will make a difference to Aberdeen. But time will tell on that one because he's out for quite a while, isn't he?
Yeah, obviously Duke back in the fold as well up there, which might offset that ever so slightly. But yeah, not get a great record at Parkhead, so we'll see how that one goes. But certainly the top two, something's going to give this weekend. Elsewhere, new Hearts manager Neil Critchley makes his debut in the league after coming up. The former Liverpool coach and Blackpool manager was selected as the replacement for Stephen Naismith. I think it's fair to say, Laurie, that hasn't been met with universal approval from the Hearts fans, but he is a manager that's got some success, obviously, with Blackpool and was very highly rated as part of the Liverpool setup. Someone that Stephen Gerrard obviously knows very well. Interesting to see how that goes because Hearts certainly need to start picking up a bit of momentum. Been really, really poor over the course of this league season so far. But that win in Europe last time out might just be enough just to give them a little bit of something to build from.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, of course, you said it yourself. It's not exactly been a universally popular appointment, Critchley, but who knows? I mean, I wasn't overly, impressed with either from the outside looking in, because my overriding memory of Neil Critchley, my only real memory of him was a very brief spell he had in charge of QPR after Michael Beale, returned to Rangers, and I mean, it really didn't last at all, and he was very very poor. Albeit Michael Beale actually did well at QPR, hence why he got his move, back north of the border. But one thing that will be interesting with Neil Critchley, and you mentioned it, his Liverpool pedigree. When he was there, he was working alongside Jan Danda, who everyone was really excited when Hearts managed to prize him away from Ross County, but he hasn't really, shown his previous form yet. So maybe Yandanda might kick on now in a maroon jersey with Neil Critchley support behind him.
Yep. Speaking of ex-Liverpool players, finally kind of rounding off this show. Ryan Kent back on the market, having left Fenerbahce. Philippe Clement was asked about him in the press conference yesterday, and he gave an interesting answer where he said he wasn't going to talk about him, and then started talking about him, which has let all the rumour mill kind of start to go. My understanding from what I'm hearing from the club is that there's little interest, I think, from Rangers to bring back Ryan Kent. I think, obviously, with him being available and free, given it's an area of the park that I think we are light in from a Rangers perspective, but I would be massively surprised if Kent does turn up back in Glasgow. I would be much more expecting him to go down to the English Championship. But who knows? And certainly, if anything does transpire and change around that theory, we'll keep you well abreast of it here on the Fourth Official. That will pretty much do us for this video. Very big thanks to Laurie for making his debut here on the platform. As I say, big game to look forward to tomorrow. Live on Sky, Sunday lunchtime, if you can't get along to the game yourself. I think it was always a ground that Rangers always tended to get quite a few tickets for, but certainly Kelly, having changed the allocations for both the Old Firm, it's maybe not going to be quite as full as it once was. Interested to kind of get your take on that. Is it better to have a full stadium full of away fans or empty seats and give Kelly more of a puncher's chance?
Yeah, I've quite enjoyed it since Kelly actually changed the allocation. I'll be honest, and I'll give a good reason as to why. So, for anyone who doesn't know, I know you do, Gary, but for anyone who doesn't, I'm a wheelchair user, and like especially where Kilmarnock supposed wheelchairs used to sit, like the Rangers fans or
In the
Celtic
shed.
fans were like, well, aye, the wee shed were like directly, above you, and sometimes, certain supporters from both sides would like rattle on the shed, etc., and make it a pretty not great experience. We've all seen the high profile incident that happened after
Connor
Liverpool
Goldson's goal.
was
Yeah.
late winner, and that was after that was just after we changed the allocation, which almost seemed to vindicate us. And obviously now, you might have seen on the Moffat stand side at Rugby Park, there is a kind of new facility for wheelchair users, like a new platform. They haven't done it the away side yet. I think more financial constraints really, but I don't see a scenario where either side of the Old Firm gets it again. And the thing is, Kilmarnock have got the highest number of season ticket holders since the 1990s. So we're doing all right in that regard. But obviously, when the Old Firm comes down, sometimes people don't always show up. They don't feel safe coming to the games and whatever. And obviously, 12 o'clock on a Sunday, they're pretty rotten kick-off time as well. But I think having Kilmarnock fans and free stands is a vast improvement, personally.
Yep, so big game, as I say, looking forward to, and full post-match coverage will be on our Patreon site. It's patreon.com/the fourth official. Big thank you to you all for joining us on this one. I'll speak to you next time. Goodbye.